In today's video, I've been asked to step in as a judge, where three very competitive contestants have decided to have a build-off during the toughest time I've ever seen to build a PC. Now, first of all, the premise of all this. Three different channels have come together to create a PC out of whatever spare parts they can get a hold of. This has led to three very different, but also slightly similar PCs being constructed. But who, I hear you ask, are these contestants? Well, that's the part where you'll probably want to jump to the description, or to check out that little annotation thing that YouTube puts in the corner, because first of all on our list, we've got the organiser of this, Tech Tested, followed up by PC Flippin, and finally Skyway Tech. And I really recommend you go and check out the three great videos that all of them are made before you go any further watching my video, because it gives you some more perspective on what they've actually put together. So, if you're still watching, I'm going to take you've gone through and watched all of the other videos, because I really recommend you do. They are very good videos, and that means you're here for the nitty-gritty judging part. Which is hardly going to be that nitty or gritty because I've had a lot of fun doing it and partaking in this entire thing. Now, the benchmarks are already in their own video, so I'm not going to be really covering them in this part, but my job is to go through and check aesthetics and creativity, upgradability, the I can't believe he did that factor, system balance, and then other areas like effort, cable management, airflow, and a few other minor areas. Now, let's start with a fellow UK contestant here though, with PC Flippin. Now, specifications wise, he went with a really interesting system, as I find it extraordinarily representative of the UK's used market. Plenty of 1155 parts are out there, and they're performing well. And Kepler, albeit lacking in my opinion, was a huge seller, and prices have gone up a bit less than the equivalent AMD cards now, making them a bit easier to find. At least right now. Sure, the lack of an SSD was a tad concerning, but the fella ripped apart some skyboxes for a RAID 0 configuration. So if anything, I know far too many people with junk or spare skyboxes that are just sitting around doing nothing that could probably do the exact same thing. However, where it does start to get really interesting is the case. The absolute legend improvised together a Connect-based PC case, which does resemble more of a test bench than a PC case, but it does look pretty damn decent. And now, we're not here to touch on the benchmarks, as they do have an objective winner, because they're numbers. But across the categories, I thought aesthetically and creativity, I absolutely love the looks of this PC. It fully embodies what I would describe a spare parts PC. I mean, back in the day, me and my friend used to host a Pentium 4 TeamSpeak server under a bed built into a box. So I'd be lying if I didn't say I love myself a bit of a janky solution when it comes to old spare parts being put to new uses. Now, when it comes to upgradability, it's 1155. It does serve as essentially the granddaddy of Intel's current ring bus based lineup that's still kicking today, so with options including Xeons, an i7 3770, and maybe the 3770K if you were really lucky. You know, there are options available in terms of upgrades, at least up to 4 cores and 8 threads. The core count is definitely the limit there. You could also bung in a real ATX case if you wanted to replace the Connect's madness that's gone on here, so there are definitely options there. The I can't believe he did that factor though, well, we all saw the case, didn't we? As for system balance, it's alright. It is lacking an SSD, and RAID does make up for this, but even just a cheap 60GB boot drive that, you know, I've got a few lying around, but only a few, so I can forgive this, would be just, you know, just an SSD boot drive makes things so much snappier. And then for the final areas, well, I don't think I can fault the effort that's gone into it at all. There was even a small attempt at cable management from what I could see with the elastic bands. But it's a case made of Connects, there's only really so much that can be done. Overall, a really awesome spare parts build. Personally, thought it resembled so much of what I would call a UK-based spare parts PC, because even I have these style of parts lying around. Or at least similar to them. Next up on our list though was Tech Tested, who went down a very interesting route, and one I'm quite unfamiliar with, namely X58, which is absolutely awesome, but is hardly what I'd call common, but that's more of a European issue. I know in Australia and the States it is far more common, so, you know, I could understand someone having these spare parts lying around. It's just I have very little experience with them. But I do know of them. But not only was this the case, he even went down the route of utilising water cooling, with a setup that he went to the effort of repairing. Now, I'm not that knowledgeable on water cooling, but he was able to throw together a really nice system featuring an i7 950 running an overclock to a tad under 4GHz, a GTX 780 Ti, the peak of what Kepler had to offer us, and 24GB of DDR3 RAM, which actually makes this a really nice system. But what exactly did I think of it when it came to the judging? Well, aesthetically, I did like it. You can't deny that the cut down the side look actually does look quite nice, especially with the cable management with the cooler, and, well, you know, it just looks pretty clean. At the end of the day, though, the part that I'd criticise is that it just looks a tad too generic mid-2007. I don't know how to describe it, I'm just not a huge fan of that weird era between retro cases and that modern sleek design where everything just seemed to be a bit bulky and large, and it's that weird in-between era. That is entirely personal preference, and one of my main criticisms, you know, is entirely, you know, I dislike the era of the cases from, but I can't fault how creative it does look with the water cooling. When it comes to upgradability, well, it's a similar case to PC Flippin personally. X58 offers less IPC than his system, but this X58 beast can take a 6-core, 12-thread Xeon that can be overclocked to rival even some Ryzen CPUs, which is about as impressive as it sounds. And the best part, it would be quite cheap to get a hold of one of those and do that. Other than that though, I don't think there's much else to say in terms of, I can't believe he did that, was repairing your own water cooling setup. Not a bad shout, but as he said in his video, he wouldn't trust it to be running by itself, which is fair enough. As for system balance, well, it's a tad GPU heavy, but if you're doing media tasks or turn up the resolution, that's hardly going to matter, so you can get away with calling it quite a nice little balanced beast. Then when it comes to effort, well, there's no doubt once again, all of the effort went into the right areas with the water cooling, the overclocking, and maybe it does suffer a bit with aesthetics, but at the end of the day, this is a very nice performing PC. And then, bringing it full circle, we have the final contestant with Skyway Tech, who brought us the only non-Intel system, featuring an FX 6300, a GTX 760, with an additional Quadro 4000 add-in card, as well as 14GB of DDR3, of which there were some slight complications with, meaning less than that actually ended up being usable. It did, however, feature 2 whole terabytes of storage and a SanDisk SSD for booting, meaning in some areas it is actually quite a nice system. Mostly because of that SSD. I love how snappy they make older systems. But once again, how does it stack up when I'm judging it? Well, aesthetically, I'll admit, I wasn't a huge fan. But then, and this does tie into creativity, given the name of the case was the Viper, I believe he went to the effort to actually add a Viper on the front of the case with the help of his mother. How absolutely fantastic is that? That adds so many points to aesthetics, creativity, effort, you know, and I can't even describe how much it really did change my opinion of what I thought of the build. Really good decision on that part, just adds a little bit of personal flair. However, upgradability wise, without moaning on and on and on about FX because we do that later on, well, it's a bit of a dead end. That really does limit what options there are going forward, and, you know, it's just, if you want to hear more, me and Robert discuss this more at the end of the video. It's just, I've experienced it, and I know where its hard limits are. For the I can't believe he did that. Well, the Quadro was such a great extra touch, especially for that bit of CUDA acceleration, or even display outputs. It just reminded me when I had an AMD Fury in my PC, but also a Radeon X300 so I could have composite output. It just reminded me of the ridiculousness of having 2 absolutely completely different graphics cards running in the same system. It just reminded me of, you know, when I could have composite output from an X300 on my main PC. I just really liked that. Either way, when it comes to system balance, to sum it up, the FX is definitely a bottleneck. Even my old HD 770 was held back when my PC was running an FX 4300, and the 6300 having 2 extra very weak cores, well, it doesn't really add much to the terms of system power, really, because even today, you know, games and programs aren't touching as many cores as we like to think they are. They might show that they're briefly, you know, glancing over the top of them, but it's still not to the stage where the FX is really performing as good as it could. And really, you know, the main area that gives the system a bit more balance, it has an SSD. I can't fault that at all, you know, it's good. Same with the effort, you know, it was really, really good to see the effort that went into this PC. And airflow, well, it may suffer in a cheaper case that's been used, but should still be okay. And you can always whack the side panel off if you really, really wanted to. So there we go, those are my very concise thoughts from build to build. And if you haven't done so already, please do go through and watch every one of these videos, as they're absolutely fantastic and the effort that's gone into this competition has been phenomenal. However, this video is not just about to stop because you've heard my thoughts. I got together with Robert of RMD Tech, and we had to combine both our thoughts together and decide on our final winner, which led to a discussion we thought would take 10 minutes, and turned into what was nearly a 45-minute, very intense discussion over who we thought deserves to win. So I'll leave that here for you now, and yeah, just enjoy. Hello everyone, and welcome to what is going to be the judging part of the video, where both me and RMD Tech are going to be going through a list of criteria that we've been given, and we're going to be saying who we think won, why we think they won, how we'd rank them or score them. This has all been sort of very much done on the fly. Like, we've got a criteria, but I feel like we've got very different ranking systems already. We've got a basic idea in mind. Anyway, we'll get right into it. You start. So one of the first areas we had to rank it on was aesthetics. What route did you go down for this?
Okay, so I've done all of mine based on a out of 10 score. I don't know, should I mention my out of 10 scores or should I leave it? I'm not sure.
You can mention your out of 10 scores.
Okay, let's mention them. So I've essentially looked, the way I've scored aesthetics is, would I want this in my living room? If a guest came round, would they run away if they saw this as a feature piece in my living room? And the answer to all of the builds is pretty much yes. But that's yes in a different way to all of them, but pretty much yes to all of them. And I'll tell you what, they're all actually quite close. I've scored them all pretty much half points out of 10. So they've all got roughly 5.
Okay. See,
so I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
See, well, I've sort of combined. I know that you've not gone down this route. I've combined aesthetics and creativity, which was the second criterion, to my opinion here, because I thought the creativity was the aesthetics. Because, you know, I love your criteria system of would you want it in your living room, but by the same regard, I'm the guy that built a PC in a shoebox, which was used for far too long. So I sort of saw it as an opportunity to, you know, combine, you know, what I thought was creative and how it turned out. And I gotta say, top of the list, I loved the Connects PC. I thought it looked fantastic. I mean, yes, it did resemble a bit of a bomb, but at the end of the day, I thought the creativity and the aesthetics there were fantastic. I thought the Viper case, I thought adding the Viper on the front was very creative. I mean, you know, it adds something to what is, at the end of the day, look like a CIT style case. It makes it look a little bit more exciting. And the cut open view, you know, it's kind of janky, but in like a Mad Max style janky kind of way. I very much ranked them all very highly like that. But I gotta say, the Connects PC won the aesthetics for me.
See, that's really interesting, because I've actually kind of gone the opposite way. The Connects PC got the lowest aesthetic score from me.
Interesting.
I gave the Connects PC 4 out of 10 for aesthetics. Now, that said, it did win creativity. I gave it 8 out of 10 for creativity. And that's purely on the basis that I loved Connects as a kid, and I thought it was a really creative idea that I'd never even thought of. And it actually turned out quite well.
I wonder if you could add like wheels.
I tell you what, I bet you could put some motorized wheels on that and make a portable gaming PC. That's
a video there.
That's a video idea in itself. You can have that one for free.
I think he's still got the case built as well, so you know that is actually something you can get right on. Oh my god.
But yeah, in terms of aesthetics, I have to say PC Flippin came last for me. This was one ugly PC. It was creative by every stretch of the imagination, but I would not want this in my living room. I thought tech tested, middle of the road. I thought it looked good, except like you say, it's Mad Maxy, and the water cooling stuff. Water cooling's great and everything, but it's some pretty ugly water cooling components. The tubes didn't really like what was going on there. Skyway Tech Reviews, I did give the highest score. I gave them 6.5 out of 10 in terms of aesthetics. For, like you say, the CIT sort of style case, I thought that was really cool. And the Viper really added a whole new element to it. But I would have liked to have seen it sort of go all the way through the build. I would have liked to see that theme carry on.
I think like a bit of spray painting or taking a bit of paint to the case. You know, it doesn't have to be fantastic, but you know, like maybe just, you know, bit of masking tape along the top and spray down the case with green. You know, fully go along that route. I mean,
or perhaps a tail along the back, something.
Oh, that's clever.
Could have
actually.
added to it.
I mean, I'm terrible for this because the only time I've actually bothered to paint a case was when I was doing that £5 challenge and did use radiator enamel, which was a terrible idea. So, yeah, yeah, I'm going to stop there because I've got no advice when it comes to painting. Would you like to move on to upgradability? Because I've got some really interesting things to say about the next category, which is upgradability of the systems. Because that's something that matters so much when it comes to spare parts, is if you're going to bother putting your spare parts together, why should you do it if you can't upgrade them later? And I genuinely thought, out of all of the systems, I'd have a hard time trying to decide between the 1155 socket of PC Flippin or the X58 socket of Tech Tested, because on the one hand, Tech Tested, he's got the core advantage. You can get a 6-core Xeon for about £25, you can overclock that to about 4+ gigahertz, and you've got something that can be moderately competitive with low-end Ryzen CPUs. That's really impressive for the age of the hardware it is. You've got, quad-channel memory on there. It's really impressive. In fact, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking X58 may have been the most upgradable platform there. But at the same time, when it comes to the ease of upgradability, 1155, I can pop down CEX right now, or I could do when they used to be open, when they used to have stock as well, and you can go and get yourself an i7 3770, and once again, you're looking at low-end Ryzen-style performance on an older board and an older system, and it's just a simple thing that you can plop in. You don't have to worry about overclocking. It's Ivy Bridge. It's got great IPC. It's up to date. So although it doesn't have quad-channel memory, the memory controllers. Oh, no, the memory controllers on the CPU are... Either way, it's ring bus, so the memory disadvantage doesn't make as much of a difference. I had a thing I was going to say, but I was messing myself up there. The FX system, and that's my final point to talk on, was I think it's a dead end. I think I loved it for what it was back when I had it, but at the same time, there's a reason why I never bothered upgrading from my FX 4300 to something better, because it all kind of sucked. I mean, if things went the way AMD wanted, maybe, but as it stands, I went from an FX 4300 to a Skylake i3, and it just destroyed every single possible upgrade I could have made on FX. There's no upgradability to it anymore.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there, like 100%. Although I think I've gone a slightly different route here. Now, I've sort of looked at this also, I mean, from the standpoint that you've taken in terms of what can I sort of upgrade here, but I've also taken into account what you were saying earlier about ease of upgradability, and that's one of the reasons I actually scored down Tech Tested on the basis that because it's water cooled, you're making life harder for yourself in terms of upgradability. And considering the fact that this water cooling, even in the best of circumstances, was already falling apart and leaking everywhere, is it really a system I want to be taking apart on a semi-regular basis to upgrade? And on top of that, getting yourself a water cooled GPU in this market is going to be even harder. So that's another thing that's made it a bit harder for Matt here. He's also got 24 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm pretty sure that's the maximum he's going to be able to run on this platform. He's not really going to be going much further than that. So he's limiting himself in terms of the fact he's already pretty much hit the maximum. I mean, like you say, you can upgrade your CPU all day long, but in terms of everything else, yeah, he can add sort of more hard drives and stuff and more RAM and upgrade the CPU, but you really can't push it much further than he's already gone on this platform.
I mean, what, is X58's 11 years old at this point? It was pre-FX, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It was the FX competitor. I mean, it shows how much better it was than FX in the state that we're kind of being like, it's not too bad. But, at the same time, it very much is a case of, we're talking something that's pre-ring bus. Sandy Bridge is so closely related to what Intel's using today. It's borderline, pretty much the granddaddy of current Intel processors of the last decade. You go back to it and it's the same basic core-to-core design. Admittedly, it is like a decade old, but it still serves as, semi-modern, whereas X58, I hate to say it, it shares more in line with the Core 2 Duo than it does the current i-series. It might have the i-series name, but at the end of the day, that i7 is more of a Core 2 quad with a memory controller slapped in it than it is an i5 or an i7 later on. So, I think at the end of the day, I would say PC Flippin had the best system in terms of upgradability. X58 coming in close, and I really hate to say it, with Skyway Tech's thing. FX is so dead that I've just saved one from the bin and it's in the back of my car. So I really hate to say it because I absolutely loved his enthusiasm for it. But FX is not a route that I've been kind to, and it's not a route that's ever been kind to me. Would you agree with that, or anything else?
No, I agree 100%. You know, FX, like you say, it really is dead in the water. I mean, what is it? It's a 6300 in that machine. Yeah, you've got a little bit of room to upgrade that, but it's really not going to net you any performance these days. Like going to an 8350, is it really going to be getting that much more benefit out of it? I don't think so.
I don't think there is. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we're seeing 4-core Ryzens match the 8-core Ryzens right now in games, because it's just unless you're doing serious productivity workloads, you know, even then, games aren't really touching more than 4 threads, or they might be, but they'll be, you know, lightly touching them. They'll just be stroking the threads, as it were. They're not actually putting any load on them. It's like CSGO technically can use 8 threads. I'm sorry. When was the last time we saw it touch something more than cores 0 and 1? You know, it's like a lot of games can say they're doing these things, and it might look like they are, but look at the individual core-to-core thing, and it's still the same situation where those first 2 cores are being hammered hard, and then everything after that is being, you know, it gets worse and worse the higher core count you go. And that's the problem with FX is, you know, yeah, you can get the core count on it quite easily, but those cores are terrible. But shall we move on to the I can't believe he did this, which I think is a great category for this challenge?
Yes, I think it's very interesting because everyone did very different things here, none of the which I expected.
I'll let you start with this category. I'm interested to hear what you think.
Okay, I absolutely loved what Skyway Tech Reviews did here. Having the multi-GPU system in the way that he did, I thought was... I never would have thought to have done that, and I thought it was a really cool idea, having 2 GPUs in there for 2 different purposes, one for gaming and one for your sort of productivity, your rendering sort of tasks. I thought that was great. It was unexpected. I just thought it was really interesting. In terms of PC flipping, you know, we got the Connects case, and I can't keep giving points just for the fact he's used Connects, but again, it was crazy. Like, who
I didn't
saw
see it
that
coming. I actually audibly laughed.
Could anyone have predicted that?
Oh, it was fantastic.
It was absolutely ridiculous, and you know, he's got to get points for that, because who would have thinking to build a case out of Connects? But like he said, we were talking to him before. Apparently, there was a guide on how to do this. People have been doing this before. It's certainly not something I've ever seen, but I thought it was crazy, and I thought it definitely deserved points here.
Oh yeah.
Tech tested vote, right? He's cut a case in half, right? And that's kind of what I focused on here. Why? Like, sure, it's a bold move, but I don't see why you would do it. You know, you maybe get a bit more airflow, sure, but it's already a pretty good water-cooled system. Do you really need it? You know,
no. It's the big thing right now. All the tech channels are talking about it. He's meant to be talking about the VRMs and how they're going to explode if he didn't cut it in half. You know, it's the big thing. It's up there with, you know, how like how these low wattage processors, these really power efficient processors, are going to blow up your VRMs. It's terrible.
How did I miss it?
Exactly. He's focusing on what all the huge channels are doing. He's ahead of the curve. Although saying that, the part that I praised so much about it is the fact that he repaired the all-in-one cooler pump. It wasn't an all-in-one cooler pump, but you know what I mean. He repaired the pump. Sorry. My notes are terrible. But you know what I mean. It's just I don't dabble in water cooling much, if ever, and the idea of actually going to the effort of repairing a pump. I mean, I know he even said in his video he would not leave it running if he wasn't in the room. But, I mean, come on, like, you know, I repaired graphics cards with a hairdryer, you know, 5 minutes before I had to make the video. You know, I love me a little bit of bodging just for the sake of getting it done. You know, I can appreciate that. And I praise the exact same areas as you did with the Quadro graphics card. I mean, I ran an X300 from ATI in my Ryzen system because it had VGA and composite output. I had the only Ryzen system probably in the UK that could do composite. It was ridiculous. So I loved that. I love the whole idea of having a separate graphics card that's sole purpose is so niche and specific. It's fantastic. And then, of course, the Connects case as well. We pretty much had the same I can't believe he did that across the board.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's it. Each system had its own one unique thing that it did so well and was just out of the blue, no one expected. So yeah, it was kind of inevitable that we were going to have the same things there because they were, like I say, just who would have expected any of those things?
Oh, exactly.
I definitely wouldn't have bothered repairing that pump, like that reservoir. It was just, you saw how much water was coming out of that. I definitely would not have touched. I would have thought, no, that's going away. We're going with a different idea. That's not being repaired today. But he did it, and he got it working. Like you say, not gonna leave the room with it running, but he did get it working. You got to give him points for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how I'd rank them. I thought, in terms of, I can't believe they did that, it was pretty high across the board. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the same time, I've praised the Connects case so much in my last few categories. But on the other hand, the audacity of adding a second graphics card for me was just ridiculous. I want to rank that as my most. I can't believe he did that, because I genuinely cannot believe he did that. Like, I can understand repairing a pump. I can understand the bodge. I can understand having to, bodge your way around a case. But something as simple yet so ridiculous as adding a second graphics card for no purpose that is completely unrelated to the second one. It's so simple. I genuinely cannot believe he did that.
And you know what? Now you've said that, I think I'm actually going to change my scores, because originally I'd given this one to PC Flippin, but now you've convinced me. I think Skyway's taken that one.
I think he
because,
deserves
like
that.
you say, I just can't believe it. Why would you do that? But do you know what? Power to you, Skyway Tech Reviews, because that is a cool little gimmick that your PC's got there.
Exactly. It is. I want to. It was like, I remember this being such a huge selling point of Windows 10 as well, is the idea that you could use whatever graphics card you wanted, and DX12 would mean they would all work in tandem. That never happened. Yeah, it's just a bit of a, it's a throwback to when, FX did let you do those things, because all the FX boards, they were all pretty good with PCI lanes. I mean, I ran multi-GPUs on my FX stuff, and I hardly understood what I was doing at the time, because it was, 7-8 years ago now. But yeah, in fact, that system's just died, my FX system. It's so sad. I've got to go fix it, because I don't actually know how dead it might be. Apparently it turns on, but it doesn't sound good. Anyway, system balance. I'll let you start with this one, because I feel like I've got quite a bit to say. So I'll let you start.
Okay, let's have a look at my notes. So I actually gave this one to PC Flippin, and it was really close. There was 1 point in it. I gave Tech Tested and Skyway Tech Reviews the exact same score, but I gave it to PC Flippin by 1 point, because that system was really well balanced. It's got a mid-range CPU, a mid-range GPU, and they're both from pretty much the same era. No one component in there is a devastating bottleneck. Sure, he hasn't got an SSD, and
that's what I was going to say. Is the SSD is fine if you're running Windows 7, Windows 10 is just it's a slog on hard drive. It is a slog.
Yeah, so it would have been nice to see an SSD there, but overall, I thought other than the SSD, it was pretty well balanced. Tech tested. So go on.
I was going to say it's exactly what you would expect from an 1155 PC that, going back 2-3 years ago, I would have probably recommended on my channel and been like, build this if you want the best value. When Ryzen first came out, I would have said build PC Flippin's PC if you want to be running the latest games at sort of 1080p medium. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of, I understand fully where you're coming from there.
Yeah, and Tech Tested, I thought it was good, but the CPU was really holding him back. He's got great RAM capacity, and CPU overclock definitely is going to help there, but the GPU is just miles ahead of that processor, so it's really holding him back. So I had to score him down in terms of system balance. And also on top of that, he's got an SSD in this system, but I haven't seen anything related to a hard drive. 240 gigabytes in an SSD. Yeah, sure, you're going to keep Windows and some programs on there. But once you've installed Call of Duty Warzone, are you going to fit much more in there? I don't think so.
I mean, I've literally just moved my Steam install to a 240 gig SSD. That's just Steam by itself. I managed to install 3 games before GTA 5 is now so large it refused to install on it. Yeah, it is ridiculous. Games now, I mean, it's more the fact that there's so much bloat associated with games. It's like CSGO, for example, I remember being like, a couple of gigabytes. But the fact is that so many games now, they operate as, they don't just exist for the year they're on the market and they're polished and they're released. They're updated so much that they just end up being twice the size they initially were, and you can't fit them all on there. I mean, I love the idea of the RAID 0 500 gig hard drives. I love the idea of, the excessive amounts of storage that Skyway Tech's PC has, but I was going through Tech Tested's video, and I couldn't figure out the storage situation. I mean, it's not one you often think about with a PC. I mean, it doesn't often come to mind, I don't often think when I'm building a PC, oh, I need to get storage or something like that, because hard drives are so cheap now. But yeah, it's a weird one, because I'd say that is one of the areas that does let Tech Tested's down, was the storage, because it's so overkill in a lot of ways. I can understand the overkill graphics card in workstation tasks, because you've got the CUDA acceleration, especially with that memory bandwidth. I'd say it's, probably a video editing beast for the age of that PC, and that's an area I'd focus on, is where, although PC Flippins has got the, the balanced gaming advantage, Tech Tested's has the productivity advantage, because, it doesn't matter that processor's holding it back. When they can work in tandem in like video editing, rendering, maybe Blender workloads, you've got all that RAM in quad channel, you've got the graphics card, you've got the processor, and I'd say PC Flippins and Tech Tested are very close. I would probably rank them, probably together. Skyway Tech's, I want to say, is, just on the cusp of being balanced, but the issue I have with the system is, I know how the GTX 760 is around what my R9 285 was. They were actually competitors back in the day, and I had an FX CPU. You would not believe the insane upgrade I had when I moved to Skylake, because it shouldn't have been feasible. FX should not have performed that bad, but you wouldn't realise how much FX holds you back until you've seen the light and seen what came out after it. And I just any FX system which has got more than maybe a HD 770, it's going to be so single core limited that I just can't say it's balanced.
See, that's really interesting, because I've never had a FX CPU. I've never owned one. I've never used one. I've built systems with them for people that have designed them themselves, but I've never actually used and operated one. So it's interesting you say that, because I haven't got that experience to back that up. Because originally I had sort of said that it was a good selection. They all worked quite well together. But the thing is he's only got 8 gigabytes of RAM in Skyway Tech Review's PC. Originally it was 14. It was brought down to 8 by the fact that there was a couple of sticks that didn't work. And so that's going to be another limiting factor here. But if you think about it, it brings that system balance downwards. So if anything, it's actually improved the score here, because the system is overall worse to match the FX CPU that's in it.
It's true, because that resembles the specs of my FX PC. Admittedly, I had 2 cores less because I had the 4-core version, but at the same time, as we said, games aren't really touching those extra 2 cores as it is. The FX 4300 borderline match the 6300 in most titles, and unless we're talking productivity, which I will give the FX some credit for, it's one of those areas where I want to say Skyway Tech has got a bit of productivity advantage with that Quadro, it's got the CUDA acceleration, it's got that aspect to it, but at the same time, it just doesn't have enough RAM in that sense, whereas Tech Tested's, when it comes to productivity, I'd say his system is so well balanced that it can match PC Flippins, and that's what I'm struggling with. I'd probably have to say, PC Flippins and Tech Tested is a combined win. PC Flippins if you're a gamer, Tech Tested if you're into productivity, but Skyway Tech's, it's ranked ever so slightly below. It's on the cusp of being balanced for what it is, but it's just limited in so many areas. It's like if you're running something CPU heavy, boom, the FX is the limit. The only area it's got going for it is the insane amounts of VRAM and graphics cards, which is fine, but the problem is that there's no way the RAM that's in the system or that processor is going to be able to actually utilize it all.
Well, let's not forget, actually, this is the only system with an SSD hard drive combo.
That is true, actually.
So he has got that going for him. And I did give him points for that, because every other system is either fully SSD or fully hard drive. And here we do have the combo, which really helps him out in terms of score, at least from my opinion anyway.
I do feel ever so bad ragging so much on this FX system, because, I do kind of love it for getting me into PC gaming. But at the same time, I have used it, I have seen it, I know exactly what it's like. So, yeah, it's one of those weird ones. Shall we move on, though, to the next category?
Yes.
Effort. I couldn't call a winner. I thought it was 10 out of 10 across the board. Genuinely, Each video had its own style. I loved Skyway Tech sort of more relaxed, chilled out style. Maybe it's, it'd been a long day. I'd been at work. I just, it was nice to have a video that was just lengthy and it reminded me of LGR a little bit, old school LGR, where it was just lengthy, drawn out, walking you through it, talking and that. It was very nice. But I also did appreciate, the more conventional style of Tech Tested and PC Flippin's videos. In general, it's not so much the videos, I'd say, more like, just the effort across the board with the PCs. Everyone built a PC. Everyone went out of their way to, get them all working. And everyone's went out of their way to, have a good time. I mean, we're both in the little server that's been made to discuss all this. And I'd say that everyone's really been putting in the effort. I can't decide a winner here. I genuinely think I think everyone's a winner when it comes to effort.
Yeah, do you know what? I couldn't agree more. I mean, you've definitely done this more based on the videos that everyone's made.
Yeah.
I've done this more on the builds. So again, I've given everyone pretty much the exact same score. Yeah, everyone lost points and gained points in different areas, but like you say, everyone has really poured their heart and soul into these PCs and just the videos in general. So like you say, it's going to be pretty much an even score across the board from me as well.
Yeah. Next area, cable management. This is a weird one. I wrote so much, and for some reason, I've started writing it like a script. For some unknown... the rest of my things are all notes. This one is actually written like I was going to voice it over. It says, going over the pictures of all the builds, because I've collated them all into little dropouts that I'm going to use in my video. Tech Tested seemed to have the best cable management, as it had the water cooling setup in there that was all working, and the majority of the cables were hidden quite nicely. Just if you had that up against the wall, yes, it's got the Mad Max style, but at the same time, it does look quite neat. For the same regard, Skyway, he's got a PC case. A PC case can hide literally every cable. I don't think he can lose in terms of cable management because you can't bloody see any cables. Do you know what I mean? It's the only case where we're not having to look at cables. And then, of course, you've got the Connects case. I love it. It's fantastic. I think it's brilliant. But at the same time, and I've said this earlier, it does have bomb-like tendencies. So, random wires just sort of all over the place. I love it for what it is. But... yeah, cable management. I'm sorry, PC Flippin. There are only so many ways I can recommend you cable manage a Connects-based PC case.
You're certainly limited, aren't you? But interestingly enough, I've actually given Skyway the worst in terms of cable management. Just because I'm a true believer in, just because you can't see it, doesn't mean you shouldn't cable manage it.
It's true, actually.
Just because you can't see that cable there, I know that there's that CPU power cable. I know that that's trailing round in front of the graphics card, and it's really getting on my nerves even just thinking about it. That needs to be down behind the motherboard tray. And if there isn't a motherboard tray, it needs to be going up above the motherboard and across over the top of the CPU cooler. That's definitely, it shouldn't be going across the graphics cards like that.
It is true. Since doing, I did that socket 423 PC, which was using an ancient, good power supply, but ancient one in a case that had, pretty much no space behind the back panel. There was no rear space to work with. At the end of the day, I managed to make it look nice because it's all about just being able to tuck things under things, or you start with an idea and you start with the CPU power and you get that tucked in nicely behind the motherboard. It doesn't, at the end of the day, there's shielded cables. You can tuck them under the motherboard. Little things like that. Yes, the 24-pin power is a pain in the arse. But, at the same time, I do think I agree with you there. If I can get away with cable managing socket 423, which no one else has ever bothered with, I'd say there's no reason why you can't cable manage FX. It's far more modern, and that case is far nicer than what I used. So that is true, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And I've given the same high score to Tech Tested. Did a superb, absolutely amazing job with the cable management here. The cables are only visible where they absolutely have to be. I think he did a pretty much perfect job. I wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
PC Flippin, for a Connects case, he did pretty well. Like you say, you can see cables everywhere. It does look a bit like a bomb, but at the same time, it could be a lot worse. It's spaghetti, it's tomato, it's ketchup, but it's where they can be tucked away, they are for the most part. There's definitely a couple of loose cables I can see that could have been tucked down or cable tied down. But for the most part, he was there. The rubber band, does this come under cable management? I'm not sure. But the rubber band, I'm not a fan of. So that is certainly not going to be scoring any points with me.
So I'd have to say, I was just going to say that I think for me, Tech Tested, Skyway Tech, and then PC Flippin at the bottom for these categories, I think, unfortunately for me. I don't know if you'd rank it differently at all, or, how you'd score them here.
I mean, put it this way. I've given Tech Tested 7 out of 10, PC Flippin 4 out of 10, and Skyway 3 out of 10. So PC Flippin and Skyway, very, very close in my opinion. But it was just, I don't know, maybe it was the camera angles in the videos that did it for me. But PC Flippins just looked that tiny bit tidier. Even though I could see a lot more cables, I felt like they were managed a bit better.
This is one thing I will say. So when I was getting the screenshots for my video of the actual cutout of the PC to make little transparent images of it, for a case and cable management built out of Connects, it was surprisingly compact in terms of cable management, because I was able to quite easily get a nice little cutout PNG without too much effort, because I've tried to cut out some things before and you've got cables flying everywhere, you're tracing over it, trying to get, the right bit of cable to be transparent and all this. It was dead easy to do. I mean, I did it at probably about 4:30 in the morning, to be honest. But, if I was able to do it then, with my horrific image editing skills, then... yeah, I don't think any of them were particularly bad in that aspect, but I do think, objectively, Tech Tested just went above and beyond, and that's why he's my winner there. Next one's Nice to Have, which is also combined with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. I don't know, really. I would say, in terms of Nice to Have, Tech Tested's for X58, in terms of that stuff's worth money. That's all I can think of to say, really. 1155, it's not holding excessive amounts of value, which is why it's such great value right now, because it's so cheap to buy. FX is in a weird state where it's expensive to buy, but no one's buying it, so you'd have a hard time if you were going to trying to flog it off, which is, I've looked at this in a weird way of Nice to Have it being how much is it worth. So I'd say Tech Tested is probably the one to want, but at the same time, it is more liable to leak water everywhere.
And that certainly is not a Nice to Have feature.
Yeah,
I don't want a water feature inside a gaming PC.
I don't think any of them really strike me as okay. I love all of them, but none of them are what I would call nice to have.
See, no, I disagree. There's a clear winner here for me. Skyway is the clear winner for me.
Is it because it's an actual PC?
It's not because it's an actual PC. It's because he's actually gone ahead and put some additional add-in cards in there. He's got some extra features.
Okay.
We've got Firewire going on here. I thought that was great. That's so retro.
I forgot the Firewire, actually. That is incredibly useful because I use Firewire.
Well, there we go. It's the PC for you.
Exactly. This is how you win this competition. If you have put Firewire in your PC, you have objectively won this competition.
Well, there you go. But no, Skyway was definitely the winner for me in this one. The Firewire, he's got a Wi-Fi card in there as well. Now, I did notice there weren't any antennas plugged in on the back of the PC. I don't know whether that was just for the B-roll shots or whether it was just in there without antennas. I have no idea. But either way, the Wi-Fi card was there. And so the thought was there, and so I gave it points.
Honestly, you have put so much more thought into this area than I have, so I'm just objectively going to agree with your scores because I didn't even think of Firewire. So, what was your ranking on this one?
Okay, so everyone got. I'm sorry, but everyone got some really crap scores.
Okay,
because not having an antenna, you had to lose some points there. But
true.
PC Flippin got 0. It was the first time I gave 0 on anything.
Oh, that's so sad.
Tech Tested got 1 and Skyway got 3.
Okay.
So they're all very low scores because in terms of extra features, they're quite bare bones. But the fact that there was any at all, I had to give the 3 to Skyway, and that was it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair enough analysis. The point is these are spare parts. There is probably a reason these are spare parts and not parts they're using. The only other area, and the final area to mention, is airflow. Which is a strange one, because objectively, PC Flippin wins because it's essentially an open-air test bench.
Yeah.
It's airflow-wise, it's whatever airflow's in the room. Skyway Tech, I mean, it's a cheap case, which is going to limit airflow, especially with all the add-in cards. Once Firewire will lose you some points there because, it's taking up space that could be used for airflow. Tech Tested's, I suppose you could argue, it had the airflow, but at the same time, it was water-cooled. It was... Objectively, the water cooling is what was doing most of the cooling, which is, I suppose, points in favour, in a sense, because, it didn't need to rely on that airflow. I don't know what I'd rank here. I'd say all three were fairly, Skyways was an actual PC. It should actually have, an in and out airflow system, so should stay relatively cool. PC Flippins is, of course, exposed to the elements. When it's cool, it'll be cool. When it's hot, it'll be hot. And Tech Tested's, well, it's entirely up to the water cooling, which is liable to explode. So it's objectively the best cooled, but at the same time, it could pull, a Seat Ibiza that my mate has, and the radiator could explode, And I've seen this happen on a car. I think it'd be less pretty when it's on a computer that's got electric running through it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I did do it on airflow, but I also did it on cooling. Yeah, as you say, I gave 10 out of 10 to Tech Tested. It's water cooled, it's open to the elements, considering the case has been cut in half, so it's pretty damn good. The only issue for me was there was no rear fan. It's 100% not needed here. There would be absolutely no benefit. It would not make anything cooler. It would not make anything run better. There would be no performance gain. But it just doesn't look right seeing a proper ATX case and no rear fan on it.
True,
I don't
actually.
like it. It makes me quite uncomfortable.
No, you're forgetting about the VRMs. We care about the VRMs. Your VRMs are going to explode. I do not care that this is a 10-year-old motherboard. They will explode because you did not put a 120mm fan facing there. And for that reason,
Very true.
I have no idea.
I can't take this seriously.
I don't know how I'd give a ranking there. I think I'd have to say probably PC Flippin, Tech Tested, and Skyway Tech because, they're very close, but that would be my ranking for them because I genuinely think, right now in the UK, we are seeing relatively cool weather. It's not particularly hot outside. I think it's about, 7-8 degrees usually, so it's not extraordinarily hot. So PC Flippin's case is quite good for this time of year. And we did have snow quite recently, so during that era, the cooling was upgraded. Then again,
and the Connect PC raises it up off of the snow, so he could run it out in the garden as well.
It's the only PC that you can use outside, elevated, with the airflow. Just needs to wait for a storm. Just have it outside during a really long VGA cable.
Oh yeah, give it a quick umbrella and it'll be perfect.
Oh, there we go. That's another video idea right there. Umbrella PC. Right, shall we give our conclusions? Because we did briefly discuss our conclusions before we started. My winner, and I loved all three videos, I loved all three PCs, but I do have to say, going through every single category we've been asked to rank, having looked at the benchmarks, although it wasn't the best, it didn't... A lot of the benchmarks were very, very, very much driven by the graphics cards. And of course, we were seeing GTX 760, GTX 770, GTX 780 Ti. We were essentially ranking benchmark performance by that. But when it came to the all-around categories to give extra points, I think PC Flippin won. I loved the creativity. I loved the balance of the system. I loved the effort that went into it. It was, I think objectively, PC Flippin was my winner. I think it was so close between everyone, but that was my consensus.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. PC Flippin for me also came away the victor here. Now, in my scoring system, there were 90 points to give away in total. There was 5 points between the highest and the lowest scores. So it was seriously tight here. But PC Flippin for me just about eked it out. It was well balanced. It had the airflow. It had the creativity. Yeah, it was lacking that SSD, but that one little upgrade, and you've got yourself a pretty good spare parts PC going on there. I wouldn't want it in an earthquake. That's for sure. But any other situation, I think it's definitely got to be the winner.
Yeah, I think so. I think the main thing it comes down to is, one, their specs that I could wholeheartedly recommend, and we did say this before we started, is, the 1155 is the new LGA 775. It's being thrown away. You could probably find it. Your grandmother's probably got a computer with it. This is a PC that anyone could replicate if they wanted the performance you can see in his video. X58 over in the UK, it doesn't exist. It's incredibly rare. Yes, it's more prevalent in Australia and in the United States, but it's just not something I could ever find as spare parts, really. FX, true, they can be spare parts over here in the UK. As I said, I've just picked some up that were going to be thrown away, but at the same time, FX just it's just dead for me. I really hate to say it. I mean, I probably will do a revisit myself, but it's just it's in limbo because it's not retro, and if it was retro, it'd suck for anything that's retro because it couldn't use any cores, so it just kind of stuck in terrible territory. But yeah, I mean that's mostly all I've got to say.
Yeah, there's really very little to add there. The water cooling of Tech Tested was great. The creativity with the Viper theme going on in Skyway, I loved that. That was also great. But like you say, the balance of PC flipping and the fact that is LGA 1151. You can get that in. Well, sorry, LGA 1155. Thank you. Yeah, LGA 1155. That's in so many of the old Dell and HP Optiplexes that you can pick up for dirt cheap on Facebook and eBay. There's going to be really easy to get secondhand, and it's so likely to have it as a spare part that pretty much anyone could build that exact system, minus perhaps the Connects. But you can get yourself a solid gaming PC there. And I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be our consensus. We think that PC Flippin was the objective winner of the spare parts PC build-off. I'm going to say before we end this, we thought we could get this segment down to 5 to 10 minutes. I'm looking at the recording. We have been going for 42 minutes now. And this will be at the end of my video, so it'll be 10 minutes of edited budget builds, and it'll just be, this is the part you care about. It's like a podcast, but it's not a podcast, but it's about the judging, and it's it's everything you want to be hearing. So it's gonna be fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me with this judging. I think it's been a really fun competition. What about you?
I think it's great. You know what? If it ever happens again, count me in as a contestant because I want to be a part of this. I'm just sad that my Vega 64 is gone now because I can tell you now that would have wiped away the competition if I'd have been in this one. I would have loved to have done a spare parts PC with my Vega 64, and I couldn't have used my 7400 because that's DDR4. But it would have been good. I could have wiped the floor with the benchmarks with that combo. Unfortunately, I wasn't involved this time in any way other than the judge. But next time, I want to be there. I want to be in as a contestant taking part in this. It was great fun.
Oh, it's been so much fun to see it happen because we've been watching it. We were there when the videos went live. We were in the server, watching it all pop off. I asked my server for opinions on the builds. In fact, as you say, you wanted to be part of this. My best spare graphics card, I've just had a DM from someone telling me that it's just arrived in the post. So my only spare decent graphics card that can run things has actually just arrived at someone else's house. So I'm looking around at what I've got, and I've got a GT 610 maybe. I've got nothing. I literally have no hardware anymore. It's just I have a Radeon WX 3100, which I think might actually be surprisingly okay for this. Oh, those are interesting. That's a video right there. I want to see.
There we go. Yeah, it's one I've considered.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, anyway, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I have been Budget Builds. This has been RMD Tech.
Yep, this is me. Saying goodbye.
This is him. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Check out every single one of these videos. Subscribe to literally everyone involved, like RMD Tech, Skyway Tech, PC Flippin, Tech Tested. I'm saying a lot of tech here. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.